totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to the Booked on Rock podcast, the podcast for those about to read and rock. The website is bookedonrock.com, and we have a new email subscription you can sign up for just in case, because some people, they just don't feel like subscribing on a podcast platform. I know my older brother's like this. He just can't figure it out, and then he's so busy he doesn't have time to figure it out. And I just, you know what? I will send you an email every episode once it goes up. And that's basically the premise of it. So you're going to get an email every time an episode goes up, every time I put up a new blog, anything going on with the podcast. So just sign up over at bookedonrock.com.
If you stay strong, something good will come along.
That's Stay Strong by Soft Open. Lead vocals by Kenward Cooper, who co-wrote the song with Michael Lockwood. Kenward Cooper is on the podcast. He has got a brand new book out. It's called Rock and Roll Will Only Break Your Heart. Kenward's story is so interesting because we all have a dream. We all have a passion for something. And Kenward has the talent. He's got the drive. He's got the passion for it. But if you work in the entertainment business, you know, timing. It's all about being in the right place at the right time. And Kenward has come so close so many times to making it to the big time. But what a journey it's been. And that's why he's written this book. It's inspiring to anybody who has a dream, who's thinking about giving up on that dream. It's a real inspirational book. So let's get to it. Here is Kenward Cooper. Kenward, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Eric. Good to be with you.
Great to have you on. In the promotional statement for the book, there was a statement in there that caught my attention. And it says, rock and roll will only break your heart, but it will put a smile on your face while it does it. What a statement. When did you come to that realization? Was there ever a period where you had any regrets while looking back, or have you always had that positive mindset?
Oh, yeah. Come on. There's going to be regrets, of course. You know, maybe one of the regrets is that I left Vegas too soon, you know, just before it was starting to break, and I was right there as the scene was bubbling. So yeah, I think I left a little bit too early. But for that quote, it's only in hindsight where you can say something like that, you know, looking at the full context. And the struggles are real, you know, the heartbreak is there. But if you can't find the humor in it and make light of it somehow and tell the story with a sense of humor, then, you know, I think you're in trouble.
Was there a point where you said, I'm done, I'm out, can't do it anymore?
Yes and no. I mean, it's like I just focused my attention to another creative outlet. But in terms of music, yeah, there was a point. I would say that was probably around 2010, just before I moved to Nashville. Actually, I was in Nashville at that time, but maybe around 2008 to 2010, just the whole rinse and repeat of doing the whole thing without any real reward in terms of reaching another level. So yeah, I probably said, oh, fuck this at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that I asked because, and I was just talking before we started recording, I worked in radio for many, many years, and that was my dream. And eventually there does come that point where you do have to think about finances, and you have to support yourself, or if you have a family. And so there was a musician that said to me something that made so much sense. He said, follow your dreams, but cover your ass. You know, in other words, if you gotta do a regular, quote unquote, regular job to pay the bills, do whatever you got to do, but don't give up on your dream. That's what your book's theme is.
Exactly. And, you know, I think it's still an ongoing pursuit. you know, I'm still writing songs. I'm still trying to find a way to get it out there. These days, people have access to putting it out. You record it today, you put it out tomorrow. So there is that side to it that's really more user friendly, more easy to just complete and get it out there. But on the flip side of it all, yeah, I'm still one of those guys that would like to have that push from a company to get it even further, you know? So yeah, I still think about it. At this point, it doesn't matter though. I mean, I do it because I have to do it, you know?
Yeah, like we were also saying before we recorded, you think at times that you can, if you're a creative person and you love something, you think there was a point where I just thought, I don't need to do it anymore. It's not, but it's like a painter or a musician or whatever it is. If you have a creative mind, you have to create at some point. Otherwise, there's a big hole there, a big vacancy, and there's depression kicks in and you start to lose sense of really who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that.
In your book, you say your life has been a song and dance of chasing dreams. So can you take us back to where you're from and how music was part of your life early on? Strawberry Fields Forever has a special place in your heart too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the songs I remember my mom singing as a kid around the house, you know, and so when you hear it for real, the real recording, and you put it together, oh, that's the song mom used to sing. Yeah, so I think pop music was around me from the beginning, and I didn't even know it, you know, until you just figure that out later on. But I think I always had that pop sensibility, and that's probably why. So for me, I started really early, yeah, playing guitar about 8 years old, and also had interest in early signs of being an entrepreneur, you know, and starting my own magazine. I remember just buying every magazine at the newsstand, rock music magazines, and there was one in the UK that had a classified section for fanzines, like just people doing these from scratch, you know. So that was pretty interesting. I checked that out, ordered a couple, and said, "Oh, I could do this."
And you moved around a little bit too, right? Were you born? I'm trying to remember. You were born in. Were you born? No, not born in Vegas. You were born in Vegas. Then moved to LA, which is, there's a great story on that. When you were 14 years old, there's a family trip to LA in 1987, and that leads to you launching your own magazine.
I did this fanzine before the LA move, and it focused on thrash metal. It's called Raging Death. I did two magazines. So the first, Raging Death, did 2 issues of that. And yeah, once we took this trip to Hollywood, and I was always listening to everything, you know, pop music, hard rock and whatnot. So I really saw what was happening with LA, the whole Sunset Strip scene. I mean, this is like Jane's Addiction, Guns N' Roses, all these bands coming out prior to their record deals. And yeah, it just lit the fire in me to really go after that scene and cover it and write about it and let other people know about it.
And you launched your own magazine, which actually did very well, and you're only in your high school years. This is at Beverly Hills High School.
Yeah.
Before I ask you, I want to go back to that and your days in Beverly Hills High, but your dad was also somebody who's, the creative genes is in the family, both your parents. But your dad, there's a story about Ed Sullivan seeing your dad perform in Vegas. Can you tell this story?
Yeah, right around the time when they moved, my mom and dad moved to Vegas. So my dad was still pursuing his dream as a singer. took any gigs he could. One of them was at the Las Vegas Country Club, and Ed Sullivan happened to be in the audience and requested this song. After he played a particular song, he requested that he do it again. And my dad ended up playing it 3 times in a row because Sullivan liked it so much. But this was after the days of him having his talk show, but he still was a writer for a paper in New York City. He wrote about my dad, and one of those things. But shortly after, my dad started his own advertising agency in Vegas. He just saw there wasn't a lot of activity for that, and that was another part of his background, coming from the graphic design world as he did. So he started his own ad agency in Vegas.
And what type of music did your dad sing? Was he singing the standards? Was he doing like the Sinatra, Dean Martin era stuff?
He was, exactly. He was doing the standards. He was really into the American Songbook and Sinatra and singers of that style, vocal singers. Mabel Mercer, I remember. Joe Williams was a favorite of his. But he also played guitar, and I think he was kind of torn in which direction to go, which probably was his downfall, trying to figure out, well, what was it he really wanted to pursue, which direction. He could have gone into the folk world as well, but I think the standards was really what he identified with most.
Yeah, and the graphic designer gig did very well, and there is a logo that he created that we still see. Which logo is that?
It's for Jova. It's kosher food. You see this at delis all the time, even at your grocery store. Halva, tahini. It's this caricature of a man wearing a turban. It's just the face with the turban. So my dad did that.
Okay. Is that Jova?
Joyva.
Getting back to Beverly Hills High. So for a guy who was born and raised on the East Coast in Connecticut, I'd love to know what this experience was like. Can you tell us a few stories from those days? You got one for Rod Stewart fans in the book.
Yeah. I went to school with Rod Stewart's stepson, so that's how that came about. But it was pretty interesting, man, because...
Is it everything that we see in the... My only connection is Beverly Hills 90210. I have to admit, that's it. That's my exposure. So was it like that?
That's kind of a good depiction in some way. It is very, it did capture the elitism and the wealthy youth. There's no question about it. I mean, you pull into the parking lot and it's BMWs and Mercedes, and here's a Porsche every now and then, so it was a trip. And the food court was with neon signs, and it's like you're in a food court of a shopping mall,
And this actually, weren't you going to that school while the TV show was on? Was it around that time? Because the show debuted in 90, I think.
I believe so, man. So I graduated in 91, but I believe it started as I was still in my senior year, maybe.
Yeah. Now, is that around the time you have the band called Soul Shaker? Did you form the band around that? So, when did you make the transition from being the rock journalist with your own magazine to forming the band Soul Shaker?
It was simultaneously. I was still doing that while doing the band as well. Yeah. So for a little while into my high school year, senior year, I was still doing the magazine, and in school is when I met Ashley Hamilton, Rod Stewart's stepson, son of actor George Hamilton. We formed a fast friendship and a band, and we were thick as thieves, And
you're the front man.
No, I was the guitar player.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's later on you become lead singer.
Yeah, exactly.
You write about Atlantic Records and then later recording with Richard Perry, who worked with Ringo Starr and Harry Nilsson, Diana Ross, Barbra Streisand. Talk about those days. How close did you get to getting a record deal?
Well, we were in and out of some record company meetings, and we did get a development deal. We got spec time from Atlantic. We got a deal with a company out of New York that flew us there called East Records, and they put us up for a couple of weeks recording in New York City. They were going to shop the final record to labels. So yeah, we had a lot of recording time and development stages like that, but the deal eluded us in the end.
And emotionally, what is that? A lot of excitement, and then a lot of, oh shit, almost.
Yeah.
And then getting back on the horse again. Is it a roller coaster of emotions?
In some way, but I think still being that young, I was able to just shrug it off a little easier. I think later on, when I reached my mid-20s and late 20s, and that's when it starts becoming a little bit more heavier and not as easy. You take it a little, it hits you a little harder, the downfalls. But during high school, yeah, we were close and all, but I think we just kept going, and one thing led to another. It seemed we were still continuing a path that for us seemed like we were making progress, whether it was working with one producer or getting this opportunity to record. So that wasn't as upsetting as later on,
And I mentioned Richard Perry, the producer. What was that experience like working with him?
Very cool. He came down to the home studio we were working in, John Wilmer's studio, and just came in, did the session for the night, and was really focused on what he wanted to achieve. And it was an all-nighter session. We got a great result out of it, and just another demo to shop around, basically.
And is that demo, you still have it, I'm assuming? You still have that music?
Yeah.
Is there anywhere we can hear it? Did you put any of it up on the internet?
Unfortunately, but I haven't put it up for streaming or any of that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Who were the bands that influenced you growing up? You did mention Kiss in the book. You're a fan of Kiss.
Fleetwood Mac, Cheap Trick, David Bowie, Motley Crue. I mean, I was all in a mix of new wave and pop and hard rock and metal, and just mixing it all together.
By the mid 90s, it seemed like that was like the last great era of rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would cherry pick it. I didn't like everything that was going on, but I had my favorites that I could identify within the 90s. I really liked Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah, the first album, Siamese Dream.
Yeah, even up until Melancholy. I mean, for me, that was the record that did it for me, the double record.
Were you digging Nirvana? Because we're around the same age. It took me a little while to come around to that. I was into the 80s bands.
Yeah, and I think I retreated more back to the 70s when all of the Nirvana, Soundgarden, all of that stuff was coming out. For me, I went back to the 70s for the most part. I wanted to dive back into records I was too young to have really embraced. So I went back to the 70s, got back into a lot of that stuff, Fleetwood Mac and Bowie records and whatnot. Yeah.
Well, I think we could throw Billy Squier in there, right? I mean, he was late 70s into the 80s, and you did meet him at a nightclub. He was interested in your tape. This is in New York City. Your dad had moved the family to New York City, right? So this is early 1994. What happened with Billy Squier? How did that all come about?
Squier, yeah, really cool guy, down to earth, and just met him at the Don Hill's nightclub. I was there to see Dan Reed, another great artist, released a lot of great records called Dan Reed Network. And
I remember that.
really checked out one of his sets. Billy Squier was there in the dressing room afterwards. And these were the days where, man, I literally wouldn't leave the house unless I had a cassette in the back of my pocket. That's the type of kid I was, just ready to give it to whoever I met, and always trying to network. And Billy happened to be there, gave him the cassette, called me the next day. He's like, I really like this, and here's what I'm thinking. I want to try and place these songs in upcoming movies. I think your sound is like really fit for teen genre films, and I'd like to pursue that avenue. So yeah, I kind of slept on it for a bit, like a month, because it was giving away all of my publishing. And I thought, you hear horror stories about that. You don't want to give away your publishing rights. But here I am, a kid, literally, teenager, and I'm thinking, well, somebody legit whose records I love is offering me a contract. Could be a start. So eventually I signed it and let him play with it for, 6 months. But here we are. Nothing came of it. I think it was a little after Clueless came out. That was a big film, and there was nothing in between Clueless and, I don't know, something else for quite a while.
That publishing, that is a big thing. If you get publishing, Billy Squier is a guy who has said, people ask him, why aren't you out there playing a lot? Why aren't you making records? Publishing. He has got publishing, I think, on all of his music. Yeah. And it gets sampled by rap artists, and it gets used in movies and whatever. He said, I'm doing just fine.
Exactly. Yeah, that is amazing when you think of it. The Big Beat, I think, is one of the songs of his.
One of the most sampled songs of all time.
Right. Countless hip hop artists have used that beat. And of course, you can't turn on classic radio without hearing one of his own hits. He's played constantly, so I'm sure he's doing just fine.
To the point where I remember seeing him 10, 15 years ago. He played a blues festival here in Connecticut and just got up there and jammed a little bit. And he just had fun with it and left. Yeah. No, now here's a question for you though. If you're forming a band, because a lot of bands will start out in the beginning and say there are 4 members, and no matter who's writing the songs, they decide all for one for all, guys. All 4 of us are getting publishing. Sounds good, but down the line, there's some resentment there. John Fogerty is the biggest story where he was trying to share some of the wealth with his bandmates, but still, even that didn't work. They got pissed off at him and resentful.
Same thing happened with Guns N' Roses. They split every song on that first record on Appetite 5 ways, regardless of who wrote what, I think it could be a touchy thing. I mean, I was in that situation where as we were recording, it started to unravel. Everyone was like, okay, what's my percentage of this? And I didn't even think much about it, until the other guys, were adamant about it, but
I think it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's hard to keep a band together. That's what's amazing when you see a U2 or a ZZ Top. Green Day is another one. I think there was a Rolling Stone article about bands who've been around with the same lineup for the longest. Yeah. That is not easy to do.
No, exactly. I think U2 is one of those rarities because you do see footage of them where they're all in the same room and actually working out the song from its infancy to whatever it becomes, even with the producers involved. To me, that they seem like a real hands-on band, which is amazing.
Yes. There was a point there where they thought about breaking up, I think, or just going their own separate way for a little while, but never did. Never did. And ZZ Top, until Dusty Hill passed a year or so
Right.
ago. It was Dusty Hill on bass, Frank Beard on drums, Billy Gibbons on guitars and vocals, and that was it from like 1971 or whatever, whenever they
Yeah.
formed, right until the end. And that's just amazing. It's amazing.
It is.
The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. Along the way, you fall in love with this girl named Desi, and this made me think of the Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks type of story. You make a connection musically, romantically, and you had quite an adventure with her. Where did you meet?
New York City. Yeah, this was in New York, mid-90s, mid to late 90s, around 96. And
Was it instant?
yeah, it was. It was one of those things where I had responded to an ad in the Village Voice. It caught my attention because the artist she listed, nobody else had listed those artists in ads. She listed Kate Bush, Suede, The Cure, and then her name. And I was like, I've only heard one person named Desi before. So it all just kind of was tugging at me to make that call. And when I met her in person, I thought, all right, it'll be one of those quick meetings. I play my tape and
She faked her accent, right? Wasn't that? She faked her accent. Yeah.
kind of screamed the call. She was screaming calls. And I guess she thought, well, if the person is serious, they'll come. And so, yeah, it was quite a funny accent, but I went anyway. And when
And
I
off you
met,
went.
we did.
And at this point, you did form a band called the Internationals, or was this later?
That was later. That was when we moved to Vegas and I started my own project.
Okay, so you moved. Yes, all right. Now, but here is where there's some promise. Again, somebody compares you to Alice Cooper, right? So again, you're starting to feel like this could be it.
Yeah, there was a lot of excitement going on playing the Vegas scene at that time. When Desi and I finally decided to get married, we moved back to my hometown, back to Vegas, and we continued to write together, but finding those key members didn't come as easy. So it was then that I put together my own project. And for me, it came easier that way. You know, clicking with other guys into the same, more or less into the same stuff, but with that youthful appearance and unity, we just really became like a pack of brothers. And playing the scene and everything, yeah, it was a good time.
It's an exciting time. Sure, when you're in your 20s, it's an adventure. Kenward Cooper here to talk about his book, Rock and Roll Will Only Break Your Heart, which is out now. Did you have problems with drugs or alcohol? Were you able to avoid those pitfalls?
Yeah, drugs never my thing, but yeah, I did like going out too much. That became my pitfall. The Vegas nightlife. You get off at work at 11:30. You're kind of amped up. Your fellow workers want to go out, have a drink. So yeah, I started getting a little bit too much into the nightlife. And with that comes, what do? You drink. So yeah, not that I was looking to do that, but I enjoyed being out, you know.
There are musicians who've had addiction problems where you hear about when they're on the road, they have to have a team of people around them to keep them away from the temptations, the drug dealers, the so-called friends who are gonna lead them down that path again. It's not easy. And did you have friends, musician friends that did go through some difficult periods, some dark times?
Yeah. Later on, a couple of my bandmates did go down that road with using the hard stuff. It's not easy, man, to see. It's one of those things I think people just find themselves in, and it's hard to keep together when that happens.
It's all around you too.
Yeah,
The
it's
temptations
all
are all over. They're all yeah. Your marriage to Desi doesn't last, and this is another story it's out of a Hollywood movie. Only it really happened. You were together for how long? How long were you married?
We were married. We were together for 5 years. Married
Yeah.
for 2 of those 5 years.
You start to drift apart a little bit, and then there's a band member that's
Yeah.
into her.
Yeah, basically, that's really the sum of it. At some point, neglect starts to happen. I'm off doing my band thing. She's putting together her own project, meets another musician, and they start writing, recording together, and pursuing it. For her, it started to unravel between us. I think for her, she wanted to feel complete with a partner that was doing music as well as being in a relationship together. And that was us originally. But when it was no longer us and it was just us being husband and wife, I think her attention turned elsewhere.
Well, I got to give you props just for opening up about it in the book. Also for writing about the difficulty of the killer's success.
What I can say about that is at some point we lived under the same roof. We took in Dave as a roommate at one point. This is pre-Killers. This is when Desi and Dave were playing music together in their project. So at some point we took him in as a roommate, and we're playing music all the time. So who knows what's rubbing off. There was a time where I was going to do a gig and needed a bass player to fill in, and Dave was going to be my bass player, so I gave him a cassette of stuff, songs to learn. But where this is headed is basically her and Dave end up having a relationship. They leave Vegas, they go to Chicago, and at some point they return to Vegas. And it's a little too late, I don't really welcome the situation, and I'm not all open arms to pick up where we left off. So eventually she goes back to Europe, and this is where the Killers actually form. And it was those later years where I was still in Vegas, decided maybe I'm going to leave, maybe I'm going to go to New York. And just before all of that, hearing about the Killers forming, and
He's the lead guitarist of the band.
Yeah.
There's a story about Candy Shoes, a commercial.
Yeah, a different band that I met in New York, met one of the brothers. They ended up writing a song for Hilary Duff. Okay.
That's the one, yes.
Yeah. So the song was used in a commercial for Candy Shoes. And basically it's parts of my song that was on the tape that I gave to this band, who are the writers of the Hilary Duff song. Yeah, they took my tune, changed it up. We had a settlement out of court.
Oh, good for you. So you did take legal action then.
I did. I took legal action. I didn't waste a day. I mean, the moment I heard that song, I'm like, holy shit. I knew it's my tune. There was no doubt about it.
And you had the evidence to back it up. You got the tape, right? The song's on tape.
Exactly.
It's like, go ahead, play it. Be my guest.
Yeah, exactly.
Play them back to back.
Yeah, I had the copyright, had the email exchange with the band members, and
you got to be tough, right, in that business. You got, there are people that you think you can trust, right? I mean, you thought you could trust this guy. You were sharing some music with him. Say, check this out.
Yeah, it's a band that's already established. They had their own hits, and they were starting their imprint label. I'm like, this is a good chance to get in with them. And hey, I mean, if it would have been different and they would have said, we like this, but let's change it up, would you be into that? You bet your ass I would have. I would have said, yeah, I'm willing to change it. Let's work on it together.
What was the Richard Marx story too? There was one.
Richard Marx, man, just someone that I met in Nashville. I had been in touch with his manager, so we had exchanged emails back and forth. I'd constantly be sending material for a while. And Richard Marx was one of his artists and someone that he said, I'm going to forward some material to him. And the time I ran into Richard, I just brought it up. I said, hey, did your manager mentioned getting these songs to you? Did you ever listen to it? And he just did this about face and kind of nervous and made his way out of the venue. After I heard some of the tracks on the record he made after that, just skipping around, the intro was like, it just made me laugh. I mean, you can't copyright a sound effect, you know, it was really more or less, the intro was pretty damn similar, but it's not like it was the actual song, but it just made me laugh. That for me, it's like,
Well, but then it added up in your head. You said, "Oh,
yeah,
okay.
exactly.
So this is why he didn't want to deal with me because he was,
Yeah,
he was
exactly.
using my tape."
Yeah,
Jesus, man, what a business, man. It can be tough, but at the end of the day, it's still the love of making music that
absolutely.
it never leaves you. And there is a comment that someone at a guitar shop said to you not long ago that gave you some perspective. And his comment was, at the end of the day, it's all just a piece of wood. Can you give a
Yeah,
backstory on this and what led to the comment and how it motivated you to get back to making more music?
I had put my guitars in a storage unit, and man, I had the unit for about 9 months. Felt pretty safe and secure to me, but evidently it got broken into. Had four guitars stolen right out of there, and went up and down the coast basically to every guitar shop trying to find them. And one of the shops I went into, I gave him, you know, a flyer of all the missing guitars. He's like, I'll keep my eye out for it, but listen, at the end of the day, just be glad they didn't hit you over the head. At the end of the day, it's a piece of wood, you know, be thankful for that. So yeah, it puts it in perspective. Things could have been worse, but you gotta find your way
And
out of it.
you got back to making more music soon
Yeah,
after that.
sure did.
And
Yeah.
so where are you at today? Because there's a great quote at the end of the book that says, "Only time decides when it's time."
Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. I'm just continuing to do that. You make music, write songs. I have another co-write I did with Michael Lockwood, who did a lot of work with Amy Mann and Fiona Apple and such.
Okay.
Great collaborator, great producer we've written together. So hopefully that'll come out in 2023. Put it out as a single with a B side, and see where it goes. You know,
And you work in the real estate business?
I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my gig. You know, I've been actively doing real estate for 3 years now, licensed in California as well as Nevada. So I go back and forth between markets, and
But you're living in Vegas now?
yeah,
What do you hope people will get out of this book?
I hope they connect with it and come away with, it's not too late to continue doing whatever your passion is. If you really have the drive, you'll find your way. Just keep doing it because you love it. That's really the takeaway of it all, you know?
Do you think any things would be different if you were in your teens nowadays? Because nowadays it's that you get the DIY approach. Everybody can get their music out there, and
I wonder,
it's a
man.
whole different world. It's not about getting a
Yeah,
song on the radio as much as it is about building an audience through social media and YouTube. It's a
exactly.
whole different. So would things be different for you?
Well, maybe. I mean, you think about TikTok and how these teenagers who really can utilize that platform. And maybe that is the avenue for teens these days. If something was like that available when I was a teen, maybe that would have been the avenue to launch a career. Who knows? I mean, it's working for kids these days, right?
Yeah, and I think just from a creative aspect, I think if nothing else, you're able to take advantage of the technology today where I've said this, and I guess I'm showing my age, but the fact that I can broadcast out of my home here, you know, when I was working in radio all those years, it's like you had to have some serious cash to set up a studio in your home.
Yeah.
So it was either you drive 40, 50 miles out to a radio station somewhere so you can get behind a microphone, and you have to get the green light from a program director, and you have, you know, send out, I used to send the audition tapes out to every station around. Whereas now you could just set it up, do it, go. And if people like it, they like it. If not, you're still having fun doing it. So I think from creatively, it's for young people who have to create, you have your outlet there. You don't have to, even acting, you think like how many gigs are out there for actors, you know?
And it does seem like there's more outlets for actors, for musicians. There's definitely more outlets. And if anything, that's the beautiful thing about today, where we're at, is that there's all these channels and platforms. So use it, you know?
Sure. I mean, look at there's some fan-made movies on YouTube that are amazing. So yeah, it's an exciting time, I think.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, this was it was a great book to read, and like I told you, it's kind of reaffirming to me, because I told you I kind of gave up on broadcasting as a whole, and I thought, well, I'll just do the 9 to 5 thing, and you know, I kind of lost my way and got back to doing it, and this book is just basically that's it. It's like, if you could do it full time, great. If you can't, just don't give up, man. You got to just keep doing it, because you don't know what's coming.
I'm glad that resonated with you, and that definitely is the takeaway. So if people that, you don't have to be a musician or to really get the essence of what the story is. And absolutely, man. Well said there.
Well, the book is out now, and people can get it. It's out through Glambone Books.
Yeah, my
Right.
own little
That's your
imprint. Put it
That's
out.
your own imprint. Gotcha. Okay. So where's that name Glambone come from?
You know, in some way, it's kind of meant to be derogatory, but in the funniest way. Glam bone. It's basically saying, glam fuck, you glam fuck. You know?
That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Uh,
So, but you can get the book pretty much anywhere. I mean, Amazon, it's on sale through Amazon. Do you have a website you want to let people know about, social media pages?
yeah, sure. The best way to find me is on Instagram. That's the only social media outlet I really update and take part in. So yeah, it's at glam_bone, and you'll find me there. And the book, you can find it on Amazon.
Cool. Kenward Cooper, thanks, man. This was great.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, good chat, man. I'm glad to do this with you.
That's it. It's in the books.